Have you ever said no to somebody and then spent the next hour feeling guilty about it? You finally said no. You had a perfectly good reason. You knew you didn't have the time, the energy, the money, or maybe you simply didn't want to do it. But instead of feeling relieved, you felt terrible. You started replaying the conversation. Maybe I sounded rude. Maybe they're upset with me. Maybe I should call them back. Maybe I should have just said yes. And before you know it, you're apologizing for a boundary you had every right to set. If you've ever done that, I want you to hear something today. Feeling guilty doesn't always mean you did something wrong. Sometimes it simply means you did something different. Especially if you've spent years being the person who says yes, the dependable one, the helpful one, the one everybody calls, the one who figures it out, the one who says, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." After a while, saying yes becomes part of your identity, and people get used to it. But here's where it gets interesting. You get used to it too. You start believing that being a good person means always being available, that being loving means never disappointing anybody, that being kind means putting yourself last, and eventually, you don't even ask yourself whether you want to say yes. You just say it. Then resentment starts creeping in. You're helping, but you're irritated. You're giving, but you're exhausted. You're showing up, but somewhere inside you're thinking, why am I always the one? And that's when you have to ask yourself a difficult question. Am I saying yes because I genuinely want to help? Or am I saying yes because I'm afraid of what will happen if I say no? Afraid they'll be disappointed? Afraid they'll think you're selfish? Afraid they'll stop calling? Afraid they'll talk about you? Afraid they'll treat you differently? Because those are two very different kinds of yes. One comes from love, the other comes from fear. And here's something I've learned. A yes that comes from fear will eventually cost you peace. Think about how many times you've agreed to something and regretted it almost immediately. Someone asks you for a favor. Your mind says, no. Your body says, please, no. Your schedule says, absolutely not. And your mouth says, sure. Then you get off the phone and think, why did I just agree to that? Sometimes we laugh about it, but when it becomes a pattern, it can leave you emotionally exhausted because you're constantly making room for everybody else's needs while pushing your own further down the list. And then one day, you finally say no, and suddenly the guilt arrives. But I want you to consider something. Maybe the guilt isn't telling you to change your answer. Maybe it's simply the discomfort of learning a new way to live. When you've spent years saying yes, a healthy no can feel wrong at first, not because it is wrong, but because it isn't familiar. That's important. Uncomfortable doesn't automatically mean wrong, and neither does somebody else's disappointment. This one can be difficult to accept. People are allowed to be disappointed by your no. They can wish you'd said yes. They can be frustrated. They can even disagree with your decision, and you can still keep your answer.
You don't have to immediately fix every uncomfortable feeling another person experiences. Sometimes we exhaust ourselves trying to make sure nobody is ever unhappy with us, but that's impossible. You could give everything you have, and somebody would still want something else. And this is where faith has taught me something important. Jesus loved people deeply. He served people. He gave. He helped. He had compassion. But he was not available to everybody every second of every day. There were times he withdrew. There were times he went away to pray. There were times crowds were looking for him and he moved on. Luke 5:16 says, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." I love the word often, not once, not when everything was finished, not after everybody had been satisfied, often. Even Jesus made room to withdraw, to pray, to rest, to reconnect with God. So why do we sometimes believe exhaustion is proof that we're loving people well? It isn't. You don't have to run yourself into the ground to prove that you have a good heart. And saying no doesn't erase your kindness. Let me say that again. Saying no does not erase all the times you said yes. One boundary doesn't make you selfish. One unavailable day doesn't make you unreliable. One decision to protect your peace doesn't suddenly make you uncaring. You are allowed to have limits. You're human. And limits are not character flaws. Sometimes the healthiest sentence you can learn is simply, "I can't do that this time." Notice what I didn't add: a 5-minute explanation, a detailed excuse, a whole story designed to make the other person approve of your no. Sometimes, "I can't do that this time," is enough. You can be gracious, you can be respectful, you can be loving, but you don't always have to present a legal case for why you're allowed to decline something. And if you're someone who feels compelled to explain everything, try noticing that. Why am I explaining this so much? Am I giving information, or am I trying to get permission to have a boundary? That's a powerful difference, because your boundary doesn't always need somebody else's agreement to be valid. Now, of course, boundaries aren't an excuse to become cold. They aren't an excuse to stop caring. And they aren't about saying no to everything simply because you can. There will be times when love asks us to sacrifice. There will be times when family needs us. There will be times when helping somebody is inconvenient, and we should help anyway. That's part of loving people. But there's a difference between occasionally sacrificing out of love and living your entire life afraid to disappoint anybody. God gave you compassion, but He also gave you wisdom. And sometimes wisdom says yes. Sometimes wisdom says not now. And sometimes wisdom simply says no. Here's another thing to watch for. Pay attention to what happens when you start setting healthy boundaries. Some people will understand immediately. Some people may need time to adjust. And some people may become surprisingly upset. That doesn't automatically mean they're bad people. Maybe they've simply become accustomed to your availability, but their reaction can still teach you something. A relationship that can only survive when you never say no isn't asking for love. It's asking for access without limits. Healthy relationships have room for two people, two sets of needs, two schedules, two opinions, two human beings who are both allowed to say, I can't today, and still love each other tomorrow. So the next time you say no and that familiar guilt starts rising, don't immediately change your answer. Sit with it for a moment. Ask yourself, did I actually do something wrong? Was I cruel? Was I dishonest? Was I intentionally hurtful? Did I break a responsibility that genuinely belonged to me? If the answer is yes, then make it right. Apologize. Learn. Do better. But if the answer is no, if you were simply honest about what you could or couldn't do, then maybe you don't need to apologize. Maybe you just need to tolerate the uncomfortable feeling long enough for it to pass. Because every time you set a healthy boundary and survive the discomfort, you teach yourself something. I can say no and still be a good person. I can disappoint someone and still love them. Someone can disagree with me and I can still have peace. I don't have to abandon myself to prove that I care about somebody else. And maybe that's the message you needed today. You don't have to stop being kind. Please don't. The world needs kind people. Keep your soft heart. Keep your generosity. Keep showing up for people when you can. Keep helping. Keep loving. Keep giving. But don't confuse kindness with having no limits, because you matter too. Your time matters. Your energy matters. Your peace matters. Your responsibilities matter. And yes, your no matters too. So if you've been feeling guilty because you finally told somebody no, take a moment, breathe, pray about it, and ask God for wisdom. Maybe pray something simple. God, help me know when to give and when to step back. Help me love people without losing myself. Help me serve from love, not fear. And give me peace when the right answer is no. Then trust that wisdom, because you can be loving and still have boundaries. You can be generous and still have limits. You can have a good heart and still say no. And the next time guilt whispers, you're a bad person for saying no, remind yourself, no, I'm simply learning that I matter too.